The machine said she was invalid. Not in those exact words. Machines never use those words. But when the card reader beeped for the third time, that flat, indifferent beep, the kind that fills a quiet store like a small accusation, that was what it meant. Invalid. Try again. You don't belong here. The officer standing near the magazine rack heard it too, and he smiled. My name is Lily Grant. I am 19 years old. I have cerebral palsy, and I have learned that the world is not built for people like me. Not the doorways, not the sidewalks, not the card readers at Miller's General Store in Harlow Creek, Tennessee, that require a steady hand and a machine that actually works. I have learned to move through a world that was not designed for me, and I have learned to do it quietly without complaint, without drawing attention. That Tuesday morning, I just wanted bread. A loaf of bread, a carton of milk, and a can of soup. $12.40. Legal, legitimate, mine by right. What happened next changed everything. Not just for me. For the 17 women who were still waiting to come home. The alarm on Lily's phone went off at 6:15. She lay still for a moment in the narrow bedroom of the trailer listening. Through the thin wall, she could hear the hiss and rhythm of her grandmother's oxygen concentrator, that steady mechanical breath that had become the sound of home. As long as she could hear it, Ruth was still here. Lily pushed herself upright, slowly, methodically, the way her physical therapist had shown her 3 years ago, when the tremors in her left hand had gotten worse. She reached for her forearm crutches before her feet touched the floor. Habit. Muscle memory. The crutches were silver aluminum worn smooth at the grips, and she had learned to move with them, the way some people learn to move with their own hands, without thinking, without effort, without apology. The trailer was small, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that was more of a hallway, a bathroom where you had to angle yourself sideways to close the door. The linoleum floor had lifted at the corners in 3 places, and Lily had taped them down with duct tape, which had helped for about a week and then stopped helping. The window above the kitchen sink let in the morning light, pale gold through the glass, and for a moment, Lily stood there in it and let herself be still. The wall beside the refrigerator held a photograph of her parents. She didn't look at it. She never did in the mornings. Mornings required forward motion. She opened the refrigerator and took stock. Half a gallon of milk almost gone. 6 eggs, a stick of butter, a heel of bread left in the bag. 2 slices. She set the bread on the counter and wrote a list on the back of an old envelope, the same envelope she had been adding to and crossing off for 2 weeks because writing a new one felt wasteful. Bread, milk, soup if the balance allowed. She went to the small ceramic bowl on the counter where she kept the EBT card. $12.40 on the account. She had checked the balance 3 times the night before on her phone, refreshing the page each time as if the number might change. It hadn't changed. $12.40, which was enough for what she needed, which was all that mattered. She pocketed the card and went to check on Ruth. Her grandmother was awake, propped against her pillows, the oxygen tubes looped under her nose, her hands folded across the worn quilt that had covered her bed for as long as Lily could remember. Ruth Grant was 71 years old, and she had the face of a woman who had worked hard for a long time and was still working even now, even like this. Her eyes, when she opened them, were sharp and dark and full of the same stubborn intelligence that Lily had inherited without knowing it. How are you feeling, Grandma? Like Tuesday, Ruth said, which is to say not like Monday and not yet like Wednesday. Lily smiled. I'm going to the store. I'll be back before 9. Ruth reached out and caught Lily's wrist with a hand that was still strong, still certain. Her eyes moved across Lily's face with the careful reading of a woman who had been watching over this girl for 4 years and had learned to hear the things she didn't say. You be careful, Ruth said. I'm always careful. Ruth held her gaze for a moment longer. Then she let go. Miller's General Store sat at the corner of Dawson Street and Route 9, a white cinder block building with a hand-painted sign that had been fading since before Lily was born. The parking lot was cracked asphalt with weeds growing through the joints, and the automatic door had a hesitation in it. You stepped on the mat and waited a full second before it decided to open, which gave you just enough time to feel uncertain about whether you belonged inside. Lily had been shopping at Miller's for 2 years, since she had dropped out of community college to care for Ruth, since she had filed for disability benefits with the state, a process that had taken 4 months and involved 14 separate forms and 2 appeals and a phone call with a caseworker who had spoken to her in the careful, slowed-down voice people used with children and the very old. Since she had become, in the eyes of certain people in Harlow Creek, a category rather than a person. She entered the store at 8:15. Dorothy Sims was behind the register, her white hair pinned back, her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead the way she always wore them when she wasn't reading. Dorothy was somewhere around 60, with a face that held kindness the way good wood holds warmth deep in the grain, not on the surface. She had processed Lily's EBT card twice a month for 2 years, and she had never once looked at it the way some cashiers looked at it, like something shameful, like something to be suspicious of. "Morning, hon," Dorothy said. "Morning," Lily said, and began moving through the aisles. She took her time, not because she was slow. She had trained herself to be efficient on crutches, but because she liked it here. The store smelled like floor wax and coffee and the sweetness of the bakery rolls the owner's wife delivered every Tuesday morning. The lights were fluorescent and some of them buzzed, but the buzzing was a sound she had come to associate with normalcy, with the ordinary weight of an ordinary day. She picked up a loaf of bread, a carton of milk. She stood in front of the canned soup and calculated, checked the label, checked the price, and placed the soup in the small basket that hung from her left crutch. She went to the register. 3 other people were in line ahead of her, a man in work boots, a woman with a toddler on her hip, an older gentleman reading the back of a granola bar with the concentration of someone studying a legal document. Lily waited. She was good at waiting. She had learned early that patience was not weakness, it was a form of armor. When her turn came, she set the items on the belt and reached for the EBT card. The card reader was old. Dorothy had apologized for it more than once. Sometimes it needed 3 swipes, sometimes 4. Lily swiped the card. The machine beeped. She swiped it again. The machine beeped again. "I'm sorry," Lily said to no one in particular, to everyone. "The reader, it sometimes needs a few tries." "I know, hon," Dorothy said. "Take your time." Someone behind her in the line exhaled audibly. Not a sigh exactly, more of a sound that meant, "I have somewhere to be, and you are in the way of my being there." Lily's face went warm. She steadied her left hand against the counter the way she had to when the tremors were close and swiped the card a third time. The machine beeped. She was reaching to try again when the voice came. "Ma'am, let me see that card." She turned. Officer Derek Marsh had been standing near the magazine rack at the far end of the store. She had not noticed him when she came in. That was, she would understand later, by design. He was 45 years old, broad-shouldered, with a face that had never quite learned what to do with itself when there was no authority to assert. He wore his uniform the way some men wore power, not to serve but to remind. His badge caught the fluorescent light and threw it back. He was already moving toward her before she answered. "That card," he said, "again, let me see it." His tone was not the tone of a question. It was the tone of a door closing. Lily's stomach tightened. "It's mine," she said. "It's a legitimate EBT card. I have cerebral palsy I qualify for." "I didn't ask about your medical history." He reached the counter and held out his hand. The card. Her hands were shaking, and not from fear, not yet, or not only fear. The tremors came with stress, with cold, with the effort of holding herself still in a situation that demanded stillness. She held the card out. Marsh took it. He examined it with deliberate theatrical suspicion. He turned it over. He squinted at the raised lettering, the way someone squints at a document they are absolutely certain is fraudulent, even before they have read it. "When did you get this?" "6 months ago. After I had to leave school to take care of my grandmother." "Convenient." "It's the truth." His eyes lifted to hers. "Don't raise your voice at me." Lily had not raised her voice. She had not raised it at all, but she understood in the way that people who have been spoken to this way before understand that it didn't matter. The statement was not a report of what had happened. It was a warning about what was about to. She opened her mouth to respond. He hit her. The slap was not a warning, and it was not impulse, and it was not anger in the way anger is usually described. Heat and loss of control, and a moment that the person regrets before it is over. It was something colder than that. It was deliberate. A demonstration performed for an audience that Marsh had correctly calculated would not intervene. His palm connected with the left side of Lily's face with a sound that went through the store like a crack in glass. Her head snapped sideways. The crutches went out from under her left arm. She caught herself against the counter barely, but her balance on the right side collapsed, and she went down hard, her hips striking the floor, her bad leg twisting under her. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth where her teeth had cut the inside of her cheek, and for a moment the fluorescent lights above her swam and pulsed. Nobody moved. 20 people in that store, and not one of them moved. "That's what frauds get," Marsh said. His voice was perfectly level. He wasn't out of breath. His hand was already relaxed at his side. Lily lay on the linoleum floor of Miller's General Store in Harlow Creek, Tennessee, tasting her own blood, and she looked up at the faces of 20 strangers who had chosen each of them individually and all of them together to look at the floor. "I wasn't committing fraud," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Sure you weren't," Marsh said. He reached down and gripped her arm. his fingers finding the flesh above the elbow, pressing in with a precision that would leave marks, and pulled her upright. Let's go. You can explain yourself at the station. Please, I didn't do anything. Resisting now too? I'm not resisting. You can verify my benefits. The system will? I said, let's go. The door opened, and everything changed. Ethan Cole had stopped for coffee. That was all. He had been driving the long way back from his quarterly appointment at the VA Counseling Center in Knoxville, the mandatory session that he had learned over 2 years of attending them, to be honest, without being theatrical, which was its own form of discipline. His therapist was a quiet man named Dr. Reeves, who had never served, but who had the rare gift of listening without filling the silence too quickly, and their sessions always left Ethan with a tiredness that wasn't the bad kind, the kind that comes after something real has been said out loud. He had been driving for 40 minutes when he saw the sign for Harlow Creek and pulled off the highway. Rex was in the passenger seat. Rex was always in the passenger seat. The dog was 7 years old, a German Shepherd with black and tan coloring and a tactical vest that Ethan had bought when Rex first came to live with him 3 years ago. The vest was olive drab, worn soft at the edges with a handle across the back. Rex wore it the way Ethan wore his old field jacket, not as uniform but as skin. They had not served together. Rex had never been a military working dog, but Ethan had recognized in Rex the first time they met at the rescue organization, something he recognized in himself. A dog trained for a specific purpose who did not know what to do with himself when that purpose was removed. They had figured it out together. Rex had been dozing his chin on the ridge of the door when they pulled into the parking lot of Miller's General Store. Then his chin came up. "What is it?" Ethan said. Rex's ears came forward. Not the full alert, not the flat focused precision that meant immediate danger. Something else. A posture Ethan had seen before in other parking lots outside other buildings, the way Rex's body shifted when something in the world had tilted slightly wrong without declaring itself. Ethan had learned after 3 years to trust this without question. They got out of the truck together. Rex moved ahead of him toward the door, unhurried, deliberate, and then stopped at the threshold. His body went still in a way that bodies do not go still naturally. It was the stillness of absolute attention. Ethan followed the dog's line of sight. He took in the scene the way combat had taught him to take in scenes not all at once in a single impression, but in sequence. The young woman on the floor, the crutches scattered, the blood at the corner of her mouth, the uniformed officer standing over her, one hand on her arm, the other still angled downward from the strike. He took in the 20 people who were not moving. He moved forward, not quickly, not aggressively, just present in the way that certain men who have moved through dangerous places learn to be present, steady, occupying space, impossible to overlook. Rex walked beside him, his body transitioning from alert to something more deliberate, more decided. "Afternoon," Ethan said. Marsh looked up. Irritation flickered across his face and was replaced with practiced efficiency by the neutral courtesy that law enforcement often extended to men who appeared to be of a certain type. Veteran, rural, not someone to dismiss. "Afternoon," Marsh said. "Nothing to see here, just handling a benefits situation." "That right," Ethan said. He looked at the young woman. He looked at the blood on her lip. He looked at the groceries still on the counter, bread, milk, soup, and back at Marsh. She defrauds someone. Attempting to use a card that doesn't belong to her. Card has her name on it. Could be stolen. Ethan kept his voice conversational. Or it could be hers. He looked at Lily. "Ma'am, is that your card?" Lily looked up at him. She had learned somewhere in 4 years of being a young disabled woman in a small town not to expect much from strangers, especially male strangers, especially in the presence of police. But something in this man's face, the steadiness of it, the absence of performance, made her answer honestly. "Yes, it's mine. I have cerebral palsy. I applied through the state system 6 months ago. Everything is legal." Ethan looked at Marsh. "She says it's hers. You got evidence it isn't." Marsh's jaw tightened. "Sir, with respect, this is a police matter. This is a public store, and I'm a citizen asking a question." Ethan's voice stayed mild, but something underneath it was not mild at all. "And I'm wondering why there's blood on her face. Did you hit her?" The store held its breath. Marsh's grip on Lily's arm loosened slightly. She was becoming aggressive. "She's got crutches, and she weighs maybe 100 pounds. How aggressive could she get?" "Sir, I don't know who you think you are." Ethan looked at him steadily. "Ethan Cole, Navy SEAL 2 tours. And I'm watching an armed officer assault a disabled teenager for the crime of trying to buy groceries." Somewhere behind the counter, someone inhaled sharply. Marsh took a step toward him. Rex moved. He didn't lunge. He didn't growl. He simply placed himself between Marsh and Ethan with the quiet, absolute certainty of a dog that has decided something and his body said in the language that does not require words. This is as far as you go. Marsh went still. I'd step back, Ethan said quietly. He doesn't like aggressive behavior toward people he's protecting, and he's very good at what he does. Marsh looked at Rex. Something moved behind his eyes, calculation reassessment. He took one step backward, then another. Every phone in the store had come out now. 20 people who had not moved when Lily was hit were recording. Marsh looked at the phones. Something in his expression went from angry to cold, like a room where someone has turned off the heat. This isn't over, he said. He dropped Lily's arm. He walked out through the hesitating automatic door without looking back, and the door closed behind him and the sound of the parking lot faded, and what was left in the store was the breathing of 20 people who had just remembered how to breathe. Ethan knelt beside Lily. He did not touch her without asking. Can I help you out? She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded. He found her crutches, checked the alignment, a small practical gesture that she noticed that told her something about the kind of man he was, and helped her to her feet with a hand at her elbow, firm but not gripping. Rex moved to her other side and leaned slightly, not much, just enough. You need a doctor, Ethan said. I need my card back. He took my card. Dorothy Sims had come around from behind the register. Her hands were shaking, but her voice when she spoke was steady enough. He took the card. I saw him pocket it. And I want you to know her benefits are legitimate. I've processed that card for 2 years. She's never had a problem. The machine was just old. Rex looked at Lily's crutch lying on the floor. He looked at Lily. He sniffed the crutch once with the focused assessment of someone inspecting equipment that has let a colleague down, then looked at Ethan with an expression that said plainly this could have been avoided. He stepped back and turned away before anyone could comment on it. Ethan paid for the groceries without counting what they cost. No, Lily said immediately. I can't let you. You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to buy groceries for someone who just got assaulted for trying to feed herself. That okay with you? Lily looked at Rex, who had sat down beside her in the unhurried, certain way of a dog who has decided where he belongs. Why are you helping me, she said. Because my dog decided you needed protecting. Ethan glanced at Rex, and he's a better judge of character than most people I've known. Rex's tail moved once. Dorothy, who had been watching all of this from behind the register, said quietly, 3rd time this month. Always young women, always alone, always disabled, or on benefits. He stands over there and he waits for the right moment. Ethan looked at her. Has anyone reported it? Dorothy met his eyes. To who? He drove Lily home. The trailer park was 3 miles east, down a road that went from asphalt to gravel, and then to something that was mostly intention and will. The mobile homes were old, the kind of old that has stopped pretending, and the yards between them held the objects that accumulate in places where people do not have enough to throw things away. Lily directed him to a faded blue trailer at the end of the dirt road, and before he had fully stopped the truck, the front door opened. Ruth Grant came to the edge of the porch with an oxygen tube under her nose, and eyes that had decided nothing about this man yet. Emma, baby, she said, using the childhood name that came out in moments of fear. What happened to you? I'm all right, Grandma. Ruth's eyes moved across the swelling on Lily's face with a steadiness that was worse somehow than if she had cried. Then they moved to Ethan. Then to Rex. Who are you? She said. Ethan Cole. I was at the store when it happened. I brought her home. Ruth looked at him for a long time. Please, sir, you need to leave. If Marsh thinks you're involved, he'll come after you too. Ethan came to the base of the steps and stayed there. Ma'am, I'm not going to let anyone hurt your granddaughter, but I need to understand what's happening here. Something passed between Ruth and Lily, the shorthand of people who have survived together. Ruth said, he's been doing this for months. Random benefit checks, visits to the trailer, requests for Lily to come somewhere with him to answer questions. Lily had refused every time. Other girls had not refused, or had refused once and then been given reasons to stop refusing. Has he threatened other women? Ethan asked. Ruth closed her eyes briefly. There's a woman 3 trailers down. Clara Washington. She's seen things. You'd have to ask her yourself. She won't talk to just anyone. Then I'll ask her, Ethan said, and I'll come back tomorrow. He gave them his phone number, made sure the door was locked, and walked back to his truck. Rex put a paw on the center console. Something is wrong here, Ethan said. Not just one bad cop. Something bigger. He drove back toward Miller's General Store, and on the way he turned onto a smaller road, a dirt path running behind the back fence of the property, worn down, but real, going somewhere. He drove it slowly in the fading afternoon light, the trees thickening on both sides until Rex's head came up sharply and his body went to that particular stillness. Ethan stopped the truck. He got out. Rex was already moving ahead of him, not fast, not uncertain, but with the deliberate, low-headed focus of a dog who has picked up something that is exactly what he was trained to find. The trees opened at the edge of an overgrown field, and there it was, a railcar. Old heavy-gauge steel dark red-brown with rust sitting on a concrete pad at the edge of the field, as if it had been placed there by someone who needed it to be invisible. There were no rails, there was no evidence of how it had arrived. There was nothing around it that explained its presence, no siding, no depot, no vestige of any track that had ever run through this part of Harlow Creek, Tennessee. Ethan stood and looked at it for a long time. Rex sat down beside the door and waited. The inside of the rail car was dim and smelled of rust and old paper. Ethan used his phone's light. 6 manila folders on a makeshift shelf along the far wall. He opened the first one, inside a benefit statement. A name, a photograph. A young woman, maybe 20, with a bright smile and a wheelchair visible at the edge of the frame. He opened the others. 6 folders, 6 women, all young, all disabled, all with benefit paperwork, Social Security, EBT, Medicaid, all from Harlow Creek or within 20 miles of it. He found the phone on a folding table in the corner. Old model basic, its screen cracked at one corner. He pressed the power button without expecting anything. The screen lit up. 47 missed calls, all from the same number labeled Dana. Rex moved to the far end of the rail car and stopped at a spot in the floor, his nose working. Ethan went to it, knelt, found the edge of a loose board and pried it up. Underneath, wrapped in a plastic bag, was an envelope. He opened it. The handwriting inside was careful and small, pressed into the paper with more force than necessary, as if the person writing had needed the message to be permanent. If you find this, you already listened to the dog. Her name is Lily Grant. She's 19. She has cerebral palsy. He's been watching her for 2 months. She's next. Don't let him take her. M.H. Ethan read the letter twice. Then he sat back on his heels in the dark interior of an abandoned rail car in Harlow Creek, Tennessee, with a German shepherd beside him, whose breathing was the only sound in the world, and he felt the thing he always felt when a mission became real. Not fear, not excitement, but a settling. The cold, clear weight of what needed to be done. He did not know yet who MH was. He did not know yet how far this went. He did not know yet about the 17 women, or the shell companies, or the men in suits who had built something hidden and patient in this small town. What he knew was this: someone had hidden a letter under a floorboard and prayed that the right person would find it. Rex had found it. Ethan stood up, folded the letter carefully, and put it in the inside pocket of his olive field jacket against his chest. He looked at Rex. "We're not done here," Ethan said. Rex turned and walked back to the truck without waiting. The rail car sat behind them in the last of the light, carrying its secrets, waiting for what came next. Part 2. What the rail car knew. Clara Washington was on her porch at 6:45 in the morning, the way Ethan suspected she was on her porch every morning, watching the road, with the settled attention of a woman who has decided that observing the world is both her right and her responsibility. She was in her early 70s with gray hair cut close and eyes that processed information before they acknowledged the person it came from. She looked at Ethan and Rex coming up the dirt path and did not change her expression. "Ruth Grant sent you," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Sit down, then." He sat in the chair she gestured to. Rex sat at his feet without being told, and Clara looked at the dog for a moment with the specific attention of someone reassessing a situation based on new information. "He's working," she said. "He's always working," Ethan said. She nodded as though that settled something. Then she told him. She had been watching the warehouse on Gresham Road for 8 months. Not because she had decided to, because she lived close enough to notice, and once you noticed something wrong, Clara Washington was not the kind of woman who could unnotice it. Cars going in after dark, not patrol cars, personal vehicles and vans without plates. She had seen what looked like a person being carried out in a blanket one night in February. She had heard a woman's voice, not screaming, something quieter and more exhausted than that. She had called the non-emergency line once. 2 days later, her great-nephew's insulin, he was 12, he was diabetic, he needed it to survive, had been removed from the refrigerator in her trailer while she was at church. Replaced with a note that said, "Accidents happen to families that don't mind their own business." She had not called again. Ethan wrote down the address she gave him for the Gresham Road warehouse and sent it to Jake Calloway in Nashville with a single line of text. He thanked Clara Washington, who looked at him steadily and said, "Don't thank me. Find the girls." He found Lily at 7:30 waiting on her porch steps with her crutches across her knees and her jaw set with a determination that had not softened overnight. The bruising on her cheekbone had darkened to deep purple. She had dressed carefully, a clean blouse, hair pulled back. She looked like someone who had decided to be taken seriously regardless of whether the world intended to take her seriously. Rex stepped out of the truck and regarded her with the measured attention he gave everything he had decided was worth attending to. His ears were forward, He did not wag his tail. He regarded her the way a craftsman regards good work. He remembers you, Ethan said. Does he remember everyone? Just the ones worth remembering. Get in the truck. Harlow Creek's public library was a one-story brick building on the corner of Main Street in Caldwell Avenue, with a parking lot that held 5 cars comfortably and was currently holding 3. Inside the hush of a place where people are concentrating on something other than each other, settled around them like familiar weather. They worked through the county records for 2 hours. Property tax filings, business registrations, the public meeting minutes of the Harlow Creek Town Council going back 6 years. Lily found things quickly. Her eyes were precise and her patience, built over a lifetime, was the kind that did not fidget. She pulled a business registration from 3 years ago and set it in front of Ethan without speaking. Harlow Creek Community Development Partners, LLC, registered in Tennessee, listed agent Victor Strandel Consulting. Ethan wrote the name down. Below it in the cross-referenced tax filing, a second name appeared as a listed interest holder. Captain Richard Harmon, Harlow Creek Police Department. Ethan looked at the name for a moment. Then he took out his phone and sent it to Jake Calloway. He had also, before leaving the motor lodge that morning, sent Jake the folder Dorothy Sims had pressed into his hands when he stopped by the store at opening time. She had called him at 6, asked him to come before anyone else arrived. She had unlocked her register drawer, removed a folder she had kept there for 8 months, and set it on the counter. 61 incidents, she said. Every time I saw him approach a woman on benefits at this register. Dates, descriptions, what he said if I could hear it. She had looked at the folder and then at Ethan. I was afraid. I am still afraid. But I've been carrying this long enough. The folder was now in Jake's hands in Nashville. Victor Strandel found them at the library at 10:45. He came through the door with the ease of a man accustomed to controlling rooms, unhurried, taking the measure of the space before committing to it. He was around 48, silver haircut close, a dark navy blazer over a pressed shirt, and a face that had been trained over many years to reflect reasonable concern rather than its actual contents. He spotted Ethan and Lily at the records table and arranged his expression into something that looked very much like pleasant surprise. Well, he said, approaching, I heard there was some trouble at Miller's yesterday. Terrible thing. I hope you're doing all right, Miss Grant. Lily looked at him without warmth. I'm fine, thank you. Victor Strandel's eyes moved to Ethan with the swift appraisal of someone deciding how much territory he is dealing with. He extended his hand. Victor Strandel, I work in community development. Consultant to the town council going on 3 years now. Ethan shook the hand once. Cole. Strandel's gaze moved across the open files in the business registration that had his name on it with an expression of unchanged pleasantness that took real skill to maintain. He did not comment on what he saw. He put his hands in his pockets and said, I understand the impulse to dig into things when something feels wrong. What I'd ask you to consider is that sometimes pulling threads in a small town unravels things that have nothing to do with the problem. Families, livelihoods. Whatever you think you found, think carefully about who gets hurt if it comes out the wrong way. He said it with warmth, with the reasonable tone of a man explaining that a road is closed for everyone's benefit. There was nothing in his voice that could be called a threat. Rex, who had been lying under the table with his chin on his paws, raised his head. He made no sound. He simply looked at Victor Strandel with a fixed, unbroken attention, the way a dog looks at something it has decided to keep watching indefinitely. Strandel glanced down at Rex. His expression did not alter, but he took 1 half step backward. He did it without appearing to notice he had done it. I appreciate the advice, Ethan said. Strandel nodded, smiled the smile of a man who has said what he came to say and left. In the quiet that followed, Lily looked at Rex. Rex's eyes followed Strandel to the door and stayed there until the man was outside and across the parking lot. He doesn't like that man, she said. No, Ethan said. His phone buzzed. Jake Calloway. He stepped away from the table and took the call. Jake's voice had the measured quality it got when the information was bad enough to require care and delivery. Captain Rick Harmon, head of internal affairs for Harlow Creek PD. Every complaint filed against any officer in this department goes to him for review. And he's Marsh's brother-in-law. Married his sister 6 years ago. Ethan said nothing for a moment. Every complaint about Marsh, Jake continued, has gone to the one man in the department who cannot by any ordinary calculation be impartial about Marsh. 14 complaints in 3 years. All from women mostly young, mostly on benefits. All dismissed without action. And Ethan. I went through Dorothy's folder, the 61 incidents she documented, cross-referenced with the missing persons files. 8 of the women Marsh approached at that store are in the missing persons records. Ethan said he was using the store as a hunting ground for at least 2 years. And Strandel's LLC, the financial connection to Harmon is documented and clean enough that a good attorney can follow it. Whatever Strandel's consulting work actually consists of, Harmon is a beneficiary of significant cash moving through accounts that don't match a police captain's salary. Ethan thanked him and ended the call. He went back to the table. The complaints against Marsh, he said, all went to the head of internal affairs. Who is Marsh's brother-in-law, who has been quietly burying them for 3 years? Lily closed her eyes for a moment. So there's no one to report to. Not locally. She looked at the folder in front of her, at the documentation she had been carefully organizing. Then she said, then we build something they can't bury. Her voice was steady. It was the voice of someone who had been building things out of scarce materials her entire life. The moment happened while Lily was attempting to retrieve a folder from the second shelf of the records section, exactly 3 inches higher than she could comfortably reach while managing both crutches and maintaining her balance. She tried twice. The folder shifted but did not come down. On the third attempt, the left crutch tip caught on a ridge in the linoleum, and she had to make a quick adjustment that pulled her shoulder. Rex was beside her before Ethan had registered what was happening. The dog looked at the folder on the shelf. He looked at Lily. He looked at the folder again with the expression of someone being asked to do something slightly beneath their qualifications. Then in a single smooth motion, he rose on his hind legs, placed his front paws with surgical precision on the shelf below, took the folder gently between his teeth, and set it on the table beside Lily. Then he sat back down and turned away with the unhurried dignity of a professional who has done what needed to be done and considers the matter closed. Lily stared at him. Did you just... Rex did not look back. He was done discussing it. Ethan looked at his coffee cup. He does that sometimes, Ethan said. Dana Hartwell found them at noon. She came to Miller's because that was where Lily had told her to come, and she sat across from them in the back booth with the eyes of a woman who had not slept in 4 days and had stopped expecting comfort from anything except possibly answers. She was in her late 20s with the same coloring as the photographs Ethan had found in the rail car, and a tension in her jaw that spoke of days spent making phone calls that led nowhere. She placed a canvas bag on the table between them, like she was placing evidence, which was exactly what it was. The police told me she was released, Dana said. That night, 10 o'clock, they brought her in for questioning, and by midnight, they said she had been processed and released, and I believed them for about 6 hours. Then she didn't come home. Then she didn't answer her phone. Then I called the station, and they told me they had no record of anyone named Megan Hartwell being processed that night. No record at all, Ethan said. None, like she was never there. And then Dana pulled out her phone and turned it toward Ethan. Her Instagram is still posting. He looked at the screen. The most recent post was 2 days ago. A photograph of a coffee cup on a windowsill, soft and domestic. 3 days before that, a landscape. The week before, a caption about the weather. She didn't take those, Dana said. She doesn't take pictures like that. She never has. Megan takes pictures of birds. She has been photographing birds since she was 12 years old, and there has not been a single bird on her account in 4 days. Someone else is running it, someone who wants her family to think she left on her own. Ethan set the phone down. When did the harassment start? Dana reached into the bag and removed a small digital recorder. Megan started recording her interactions with Marsh about 2 months ago, she said. After the third time he showed up at her apartment. She was frightened and she wanted proof that she wasn't doing anything wrong because she already knew what it would come down to if it ever came down to anything. She pressed play. The recording was clear. Megan's voice first tight with controlled anxiety. I've told you everything is properly documented. I qualify for every benefit I receive. Then Marsh's voice, and something about hearing it through the small speaker, was worse than seeing him in person, had been because, in person, there was the variable of the moment. On tape, there was no such possibility. His voice was relaxed, almost comfortable. Girls like you, Megan, the way I see it, you're a burden on a system that's already stretched. But there are people out there who'd pay good money for someone who genuinely needs help, who'd see that as an asset rather than a liability. You ever think about that, about being useful in a way that actually gets compensated? Megan's voice thinning, I want you to leave. I'm offering you an opportunity, more than most people would. Get out of my apartment. Marsh's voice unchanged. Pleasant girls who don't cooperate tend to develop a lot of problems. Benefit problems, housing problems, the kind that stack up fast, just something to think about. Dana stopped the recording. The booth was quiet. Outside, a truck went past on the highway, and a woman walked by with a stroller, and the ordinary world went about its ordinary business. He's not even speaking in code, Lily said quietly. He's just saying it. Dana looked at her. She's 22 years old and she has never done a dishonest thing in her life, and they have taken her somewhere and I cannot find her. She pressed her hands flat on the table. I need someone to tell me she's still alive. Ethan said, I believe she is. He said it plainly without performance, and Dana searched his face for something to hold on to and found enough of it to nod. The call came through the town radio system at 2:15 in the afternoon through the open window of Ethan's truck. 9-year-old boy reported missing near the old rail yard on County Road 7. Last seen approximately 1 hour ago. Family requesting assistance. All available units respond. Rex was on his feet before the broadcast finished. He did not make a sound. He simply stood up in the back seat with his ears fully forward and his eyes fixed on the direction of County Road 7. It was not curiosity. It was not a response to a familiar word. It was recognition, the same alert that had stopped him in Miller's parking lot. Something wrong in a specific direction. Stay, Ethan said. Rex looked at him. Looked toward County Road 7. Looked back at Ethan. Go, Ethan said. He drove with Lily in the front seat and Rex standing in the back, and they covered the 2 miles to County Road 7 in 4 minutes. When Ethan pulled off the road at the edge of the rail yard property, Rex was out of the truck before the engine finished turning. He moved with the controlled speed of a dog that knows where it is, going low to the ground, deliberate, covering distance without apparent effort. Ethan followed at the pace that kept Rex in sight without interfering. The rail yard had not been in use for many years. The tracks had been pulled up and sold for scrap sometime in the 90s, and what remained was a wide, flat expanse of gravel and weeds and the concrete foundations of structures that no longer existed. At the far eastern edge, a row of old rail cars sat in various states of decomposition, not like the one behind Miller's, not placed and deliberate, but rusted out and collapsed, the kind of equipment that becomes landscape when no one removes it. Rex went directly to the second car from the end. He sat down in front of a gap in the rusted side panel, perhaps 18 inches wide, and looked back at Ethan once. Ethan went to the gap and angled his phone light inside. A boy, small for 9, with a torn jacket and a face that had moved past crying into something quieter and more frightened. He was wedged into the far corner, both legs pulled to his chest, one sneaker missing. He looked at the light with the eyes of someone waiting to find out if this was better or worse. Hey, Ethan said. His voice came out the way it always did in situations that required it to be the least frightening thing in the room. Low, steady, with no urgency in it at all. I've got a dog out here. He found you. You okay to move? The boy looked past Ethan at Rex, who had put his nose to the gap and was waiting with a patience that was older than words. Something in the boy's face shifted. The shift that happens when a child decides that a dog means safety. My leg hurts, the boy said. That's all right. We'll be careful. It took 12 minutes to ease the boy out of the gap without forcing his stuck leg. Rex stayed at the opening the entire time, his presence steady as a fixed point, something to look at when the pain made the boy want to look away. When they were out and the boy was sitting on the gravel with his back against the rail car and his color returning, he put his hand on Rex's shoulder, and Rex allowed it with the gravity of a professional who understands that some things are more important than protocol. Ethan called the family. He stood 20 feet away while he did it, giving the boy and Rex their space. That was when his flashlight swept across the next rail car in the row. He stopped. The door on the far end of the second car was not rusted shut. It was latched, not with the old iron hardware of the original equipment, but with something newer. Something added a bolt latch, recently mounted, the metal still bright at the screw holes. And along the bottom edge of the door, a faint smell that did not belong to rust or age or the accumulated dust of years. Ethan looked at it for a long moment. Then the boy's family came running down the road and he turned away. But he noted it. He noted it with the exact precision of a man who had been trained to note things that needed to be returned to. He drove Lily home at 4 o'clock, and he sat with her on the porch steps for a while without speaking. Then he said, I'm going to come back tonight. Lily looked at him, the rail yard. There's a second car there. New hardware on the door. Active use, he paused. There may be someone inside it. Lock the door tonight, he said. Don't open it for anyone you don't know. She held his gaze with the directness that had been startling to him since the first moment she had looked at him from the floor of Miller's general store. She didn't look away when she was frightened. She looked at things more carefully. You be careful too, she said. He nodded and stood. He was 3 steps down the porch when he stopped. Rex had not followed him. The dog was sitting at the top step, looking at Lily, then at Ethan, then back at Lily, the deliberate, measured consideration that Ethan had seen before and knew better than to argue with. Rex, Ethan said. Rex did not move. Ethan stood in the fading light and thought about Megan Hartwell's letter pressed against his chest. About Clara Washington watching a warehouse for 8 months alone. About 17 names he didn't know yet. He thought about what it cost to leave before a thing was finished. All right, he said. Rex's ears came forward. We stay. He sat back down on the porch steps. Rex came down 1 step and settled beside him. The sun went lower behind the tree went on, and Ruth's oxygen machine breathed its steady rhythm through the thin wall of the trailer, and somewhere down the road a screen door opened and closed. Ethan took out his phone and called Jake Calloway. He told him everything: the second rail car, the hardware, the Instagram account posting in a missing woman's name, Dana's recording, the financial connections, Clara Washington and the Gresham Road warehouse. Jake was quiet when he finished. Then federal, not state, not county, FBI. I've got a contact in the Nashville field office, agent named Pierce. She's been building a parallel case benefits fraud patterns across small Tennessee counties that keep going cold in ways that don't feel accidental. She'll want to hear this tonight. Set it up, Ethan said. And Ethan, if this is what we think it is, these people will not hesitate. I know what they won't hesitate to do, Ethan said. I've seen it before. Just get me Pierce. He ended the call and sat with the weight of it settling into something cold and purposeful. Through the window, Lily's shadow moved in the kitchen light, careful between the counter and the table. The small, ordinary shapes of a life lived with dignity under conditions that were trying very hard to remove it. Rex put his chin on his paws and watched the road. Ethan sat beside him, and the night came on around them, slow and full of the sounds of a town that had convinced itself it had no secrets. It had plenty. They were going to find all of them. Part 3, The Weight of Staying. The call came at 2 in the morning. Not a voice, just Lily's number on the screen, and when Ethan answered, the sound of her breathing told him everything before she spoke. Grandma, she said. He was already pulling on his boots. Ruth Grant had been pushed. That was what the EMTs had found when they arrived, not a fall, not the ordinary collapse of an elderly woman with an oxygen tank. Something else. The angles were wrong, the bruising on her forearms was wrong, the placement of it, the specificity. There were marks on her upper arms where someone had gripped her, and the trajectory of how she had gone down the back porch steps was not the trajectory of someone who had lost her balance. He had also come out that morning to find his truck reduced to a blackened shell in the far corner of the Motor Lodge parking lot, the metal still clicking and contracting as it cooled. The fire chief had walked the perimeter, taken his photographs, and given Ethan the look of a man who understood exactly what he was looking at and had made a prior decision about what to do with that understanding. Any enemies, Mr. Cole? Ethan had not answered that. He drove Jake Calloway's borrowed truck to Oak Ridge Regional Hospital in 19 minutes with Rex in the back seat, upright, and watching the dark road. He found Lily in the waiting room, her crutches beside her, her hands in her lap, with the controlled stillness he now recognized as suppressed shaking. They wouldn't let me stay with her, she said. ICU family policy. She is family. I know that. He sat beside her and they waited in the fluorescent corridor while time moved the way it moves in hospital waiting rooms, which is not like other time. A man came to the door tonight, Lily said. Before it happened, Grandma told the EMTs. He had a badge, said he was from County Social Services doing a welfare check. She told him she didn't know him and asked him to come back with paperwork. He pushed past her and started going through the kitchen. When she tried to stop him, he grabbed her arms and she fell backward down the steps. Did she describe him? White male 40s heavyset. She said she'd seen him before, in a patrol car, outside the store. Not social services, Ethan said. No, Lily said, not social services. Rex put his head on Lily's knee without being invited. She looked down at him and put her hand on the side of his face, and neither of them moved. Ethan called Jake Calloway. Jake answered on the second ring. He had not been sleeping either. The trailer park on Ridgeline Road, Ethan said. Security camera at the entrance. I need the footage from tonight, 8 p.m. forward. And I need it before anyone official decides it needs to be reviewed. Jake said, already on it. And Ethan, the financial records came back. Marsh's accounts, cash deposits 20 to 30,000 a month for 2 years. Same shell company making deposits to 2 other accounts. One registered to Victor Strandell Consulting, one to a joint account held by Captain Richard Harmon and a holding company called Cedarline Properties, LLC. This is a structured operation with shared financial infrastructure. This is RICO territory. Get Agent Pierce on the phone tonight, Ethan said. We can't wait for morning. A doctor came out 40 minutes later, young and tired with the careful face of someone delivering news that is not the worst possible but is not good. Ruth had a concussion. Significant bruising consistent with being grabbed and falling from height. Stable. She would recover. But 69 years old with compromised lung function and a body that had been working very hard for a very long time, the stress of the night had affected her more than the injuries themselves. Lily could see her for 5 minutes. Ethan waited in the corridor. A few minutes later, a nurse stopped beside him, young with dark circles and the set of a person carrying something they were told not to carry. You're with the girl. Ruth Grant's granddaughter. Yes, I shouldn't be telling you this. She looked down the corridor both ways. That woman did not fall. I've done this long enough to know the difference. I documented the bruising pattern, the angle of impact, the grip marks on the forearms. My supervisor deleted it from the chart. Said we report medical findings, not speculation. Ethan looked at her. I kept my own notes, written out by hand at home. If anyone official ever asks, I'll say what I know. She walked away without looking back. Jake Calloway sent the footage at 5 a.m. Ethan watched it in the hospital parking lot while the sky went from black to gray to the pale color of early morning. At 8:47 p.m., a dark sedan had entered the trailer park. The driver was visible as the car passed under the entrance light. Ethan had seen that face before. Standing in the same hospital waiting room the previous afternoon in civilian clothes, asking Lily where she had been when her grandmother fell, expressing condolences, taking notes on a small pad, introducing himself as Officer Dale Witten Harlow, Creek PD, following up on the incident. He had been in the trailer park 30 minutes before Ruth went down the steps. Ethan forwarded the footage to Jake. Then he called Agent Sandra Pierce. Her voice was precise and unhurried, the voice of someone who had learned to gather information efficiently before deciding how much of herself to put into a conversation. She listened to everything without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "Mr. Cole, we've been building a parallel case for 8 months. Benefits fraud initially, but the trail kept pointing somewhere we weren't expecting and kept going cold in ways that didn't feel accidental. What you're describing is consistent with what we've been finding from a different angle." She paused. "I need you to stay where you are and not move on anything independently for 24 hours. There's a woman missing, and a second rail car on County Road 7 with a new latch on the door." "I heard you, 24 hours. He said, "There may be a woman in that rail car right now." Pierce was quiet for 3 full seconds. "I'll be in Harlow Creek by tonight. And Mr. Cole, don't go near that warehouse on Gresham Road alone." He sat with the phone in his hand and looked at Rex. 24 hours, he said. Rex put his chin on the seat and looked at him with the even attention of a teen that has decided to reserve judgment. He spent the day with Lily. Ruth was moved out of the ICU and into a monitored room, and they were allowed to sit with her for an hour in the afternoon. Ruth lay in the hospital bed with the oxygen tubes in her nose and her hands folded on the blanket, and her eyes, when she opened them, were clear and direct and entirely unchanged by what had happened to her. She looked at Ethan for a long time before she said anything. "You're still here," she said. "I said I would be." She nodded slowly. "People say a lot of things." Lily took her grandmother's hand. "He means it, Grandma." Ruth studied him a while longer. Then she closed her eyes and her breathing evened out, and they sat quietly in the beeping room while she slept. Outside the window, the afternoon light moved across the parking lot with the indifference of light that has places to be. Lily said, quietly, "She was 16 when she had my mother. She's been taking care of someone her whole life and she never stopped. Not once." "She's not stopping now either," Ethan said. Lily looked at Ruth's face, the lines of it, the set of the jaw. "No," she said, "she's not." Rex lay under the chair, his chin on his paws, breathing steadily. The fire started at 11:17 that night. Ethan saw the glow from the Motor Lodge parking lot, a low orange pulse against the bottom of the clouds above the tree line to the east. He was on his feet and moving before he had consciously decided to move Rex beside him, both of them understanding something without having to say what it was. The old textile warehouse on Gresham Road was burning. Not explosively. A building fire that had started from inside and was working outward, methodical, the way fires go when they are meant to consume something specific before anyone can stop them. The east wall had 2 windows still intact, and through them, Ethan could see the interior light of the fire and the shapes of movement inside, not fully committed flames yet, but the orange-lit smoke of a fire in its first stage. And underneath the crackle and hiss of it, somewhere inside the building, a sound. Not loud, not a scream. Something smaller and more exhausted than that. The sound of someone who has been making sounds for a long time and has reached the point where the sounds are more habit than hope. Rex was already 10 feet ahead of him, moving toward the building at the controlled, purposeful pace that meant he had decided something. "Rex," Ethan said. Rex stopped and looked back. The building's door was 20 feet away. The fire was on the far wall. The ceiling was intact. Ethan followed Rex in. The smoke inside was lower than the fire, which had not yet fully taken the ceiling. Rex moved with his nose close to the floor and his ears flat against his head, navigating by training and something older than training. Ethan stayed close, one hand on the tactical handle of Rex's vest, using the dog the way the dog intended to be used as a guide through a space that his own senses could not fully read. They found her in the northeast corner. Megan Hartwell was 22 years old and she had muscular dystrophy, and she had been in this room for 4 days and she was still alive. She was bound at the wrists, a blanket around her shoulders, not fully conscious. Her head came up when Rex reached her, and her eyes went to the dog first with the automatic trust of someone in extremis who cannot afford the time to be cautious, and then to Ethan behind him. "I've got you," Ethan said. "Can you hear me? I've got you." Rex positioned himself at Megan's side, steady and solid, while Ethan worked at the restraints. His hands knew this. They had done it before in places that smelled different but felt the same. He did not let himself think about how long she had been here. He thought about the distance to the door and the condition of the floor and the angle of the smoke. The ceiling above the east wall cracked. It was the sound of a structural joint giving way, and it preceded the fall by perhaps 2 seconds. Rex hit Ethan from the left side, not hard enough to knock him down, but hard enough to move him, the solid impact of 70 pounds of dog with absolute purpose, shifting Ethan's center of gravity to the right by 18 inches, exactly as a section of crossbeam came down through the ceiling in the place where Ethan's left shoulder had been. The beam hit the floor. Sparks went up. Rex made a sound. One sound, a single compressed vocalization, the sound of something absorbing an impact and then choosing silence, because silence was the correct response. Then he was still. Ethan turned. Rex was on the floor. His hind legs were moving the way a dog's legs move when they are trying to complete a motion the rest of the body can no longer execute. His eyes were open and tracking. His breathing was audible and labored, but it was there and it was present, and Ethan held on to that. He gathered Rex with one arm and Megan Hartwell with the other. Megan barely conscious, light in the way that people become light when their body has been through too much. And he moved toward the door with everything he had, which was the remainder of 2 combat tours and 43 years of a body maintained for exactly this purpose. They came out through the door into the cold night air, and Ethan went to his knees on the gravel lot and set Rex down as carefully as he had ever set anything down. Rex looked at him. "I'm not losing you," Ethan said. His voice was very quiet. "I'm not losing you again." Rex's tail moved twice. Then it was still. His eyes stayed open and watching, which was enough, which was everything. The FBI tactical vehicles came around the corner of Gresham Road with their lights cutting through the smoke. 3 vehicles moving fast and stopping with the practiced economy of people who have done this many times. Agent Sandra Pierce came out of the lead vehicle in tactical gear, moving with the full authority of someone who has been waiting for this moment for 8 months. She took in the scene in rapid sequence. The fire, Megan on the ground, Ethan on his knees beside Rex, the smoke pouring from the warehouse door. "EMTs," she said over her shoulder. "Now." She came to Ethan and knelt beside Rex, and something moved across her face that was not part of any procedure. "The dog is hurt," Ethan said. She looked at Rex's breathing, the angle of his hindquarters. "My team carries a veterinary trauma kit. We work with K9 units." She looked at Ethan directly. "He's being looked at right now." She stood and directed her agents toward Megan, who was being attended to by EMTs, and said something into her radio that Ethan could not fully hear. Then the warehouse door opened, and 2 of Pierce's tactical team came through it with men between them, and among them were faces that Ethan had spent 4 days learning. Derek Marsh. His uniform was present, and his authority was gone, and without authority, his face looked like what it was, the face of a man who had built his life on the willingness of others to be afraid, and who was now in the presence of people who were not. Victor Strandell came out behind him. The navy blazer was gone. He was in shirt sleeves and looking at the ground, and his shoulders had the collapse of a man who has been maintaining a posture for years and has finally let it go. Pierce stood in front of them and said, "Derek Marsh, Victor Strandell, you are under arrest." She said the other things that needed to be said in the order they needed to be said, and her voice in the cold night air was the most ordinary sound in the world. A third agent emerged from the warehouse with Officer Dale Witten, whose hands were already cuffed behind him and whose face had gone the color of old concrete. Pierce returned to Ethan. "Captain Richard Harmon has been taken into federal custody in Nashville. His accounts have been frozen." She paused. "The rail car on County Road 7, my team checked it an hour ago. It contained restraints medication and personal items belonging to 2 of the missing women. It corroborated everything." She looked at him steadily. "And Mr. Cole, the broader investigation. We've been working trafficking networks for 8 months across multiple states, recovering victims as the investigations have progressed." She stopped. "As of tonight, the number is 17 women recovered alive." Ethan heard the number. He let it settle. 3 of them are from Harlow Creek, Pierce continued. Carrie Aldridge, Paula Weston, and a 3rd woman we've been looking for 11 months. He knew those names. He had read them at 2 in the morning with Rex at his feet and the cold dread of a man who feared he had arrived too late. "They're alive," he said. "They're alive. They're in federal protective custody. They have a long road ahead. but they're coming home. He stood with that for a moment. He thought about the letter under the floorboard, about Megan Hartwell hiding it and praying that someone would listen to a dog. Thank Rex, he said. He's the one who started this. They called Lily at midnight. She arrived with Dorothy Sims, who had picked her up and who had been Ethan was coming to understand quietly keeping account of this town and its behavior for longer than anyone had thanked her for. Lily stood in the parking lot in the white hospital light and looked at Ethan for a moment without speaking, reading the damage the way she read things precisely without flinching. Is Rex inside, being looked at? He's going to be all right. His voice was steady. He took an impact. Bruised, possibly a fractured rib, not spinal. The vet says he'll heal. Lily closed her eyes for 3 seconds. Then she opened them. And Megan, in emergency, she's alive. She needs time, but she's alive. Dorothy Sims put her hand on Lily's shoulder and said nothing, which was the right thing to do. The trials ran through the following spring. Marsh faced 17 federal counts. Conspiracy, kidnapping, trafficking, and assault, civil rights violations, abuse of authority. The prosecution built its case methodically, brick by brick, with the patience of people who understand that the architecture of justice has to bear weight. Lily testified on the second day. She walked into the federal courtroom in Memphis on her crutches, dressed in her best clothes, and she answered every question with the directness of someone who has been through enough to have nothing left to be afraid of. When the defense attorney suggested that Officer Marsh had perhaps been responding appropriately to a benefits fraud situation, Lily looked at him with an evenness that the courtroom would later describe as the most powerful moment of the trial. He hit me for trying to buy bread, she said. I'd like to know which part of that is an appropriate response to anything. The defense attorney moved on. Ethan testified about what he had seen, what he had documented, what had been threatened and burned and pushed. The defense came at his PTSD diagnosis with the predictable angles. Instability perception, the unreliability of a man carrying 2 tours. PTSD, Ethan said, means I am more alert to genuine danger, not less. It means I read situations carefully because reading situations carefully is something I was trained to do and then trained again by everything that came after. He looked at the defense attorney. What I saw in Miller's General Store was not ambiguous. I was 10 feet away. The only question was what to do about it. Dana Hartwell played Megan's recording for the court. Marsh's voice filled the federal courtroom in Memphis, clear and comfortable and damning, and the silence that followed it was the silence of a room that has heard something it cannot unhear. Megan Hartwell testified via video from Federal Protective Housing, her voice steadier than anyone had expected. He told me I was worthless, she said, that I was a burden, that I should be grateful anyone wanted me for anything. And I believed him because when you're disabled, when your poor people have been telling you that your whole life. The courtroom held its breath. What I didn't know then was that there was a letter I had written under a floorboard and a bind who would stop in the right place at the right moment and a man who would follow that dog. She paused. I know it now. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all 17 counts. Harmon received 22 years, Witten 14. Victor Strandell, whose financial architecture had made everything else possible, received 16 years on conspiracy and racketeering charges. He resigned from all his consulting positions in a statement that contained no admission of wrongdoing and that nobody believed. The district attorney, who had been quietly declining to prosecute cases that pointed toward the network, lost his law license. 2 county commissioners who had received payments from Cedar Line Properties resigned within a week of the verdicts. 3 months after the convictions, the Tennessee state legislature passed 2 bills into law. The first requiring independent external review of all police complaints involving disabled individuals was called Lily's Law. The second mandating federal notification whenever law enforcement initiated benefits, fraud investigations targeting individuals with disabilities bore Megan Hartwell's name. The governor signed both on a Tuesday morning in a quiet ceremony. Lily was there standing without her crutches for the first time holding a cane. Megan attended by video call, her camera showing a window with a bird feeder outside it. Harlow Creek held town meetings that got loud and stayed loud for months. Some people defended the arrested officers. Others demanded accounting. The conversations were not clean, they were not resolved, but they were happening, which was more than they had been before. Lily spoke at one of them. She stood at the front of the high school gymnasium and said, I understand loyalty. Being good to the people around you does not make you good. Officer Marsh was good to a lot of people. He just decided that certain people didn't count. And if you defend men like that because they were kind to you specifically, you are telling every person they hurt that your comfort matters more than our lives. The gymnasium was not unanimous. It was never going to be unanimous. But she stayed at the podium until she had finished what she had to say, and Dorothy Sims in the second row reached over and put her hand briefly on Lily's forearm when she sat back down. Just once. Ruth Grant was discharged from the hospital 6 weeks after she was admitted. She came home to the trailer on Ridgeline Road on a Tuesday morning, and Lily had cleaned everything and bought flowers from the gas station 3 miles away. Rex was on the porch when the car pulled up because Ethan had driven him there so he would be there when Ruth arrived. Ruth came up the porch steps more slowly than she had gone down them, but she came up them. She stopped at the top and looked at Rex. "You're the one who finds things," she said. Rex held very still under her hand. Not the stillness of restraint, but the stillness of presence. The stillness of a dog that has decided this matters and is giving it the full weight of his attention. It was its own kind of answer. Ruth nodded as though something had been confirmed. Then she went inside. Rex watched the oxygen tank being carried up the steps and set on the porch by the doorframe. He walked over to it, sniffed it once with the unhurried assessment of someone inspecting new equipment that has been placed incorrectly, and moved it with his nose approximately 3 inches to the left. Ethan looked at him. Rex looked back with the expression of a professional who has identified a problem and corrected it and is ready to move on. Ethan said nothing. There was nothing useful to say. 3 months after the verdicts, Ethan bought land. 40 acres on the western edge of Harlow Creek, far enough from town to have quiet and close enough to matter. The property had a long, flat section suitable for building and a stand of old hardwood trees along the northern boundary and a creek that moved through the lower corner of the field without asking permission from anyone. Jake Calloway came up from Nashville with a truck full of tools and 2 other veterans with him, men with service dogs, in the purposefulness of people who have found the next thing and are moving toward it. Lily was there when they broke ground. She was using a cane now instead of crutches, a transition her physical therapist called remarkable, and that Lily called stubbornness, and she stood at the edge of the cleared area with the morning light across her face and looked at what was being built. A training center, Ethan said. Veterans and service dogs. Not just task training. Intervention. How to recognize abuse of authority. How to protect vulnerable people without escalating. How to work with social services and disability advocates so that the protection actually reaches the people who need it. And one of the veterans asked, looking at Lily. She runs the advocacy program, Ethan said. Lily said, "I'm also studying social work at community college." It turns out that nearly being disappeared makes you very clear about what you want to do with your life. Agent Pierce drove out in the late morning. She parked her government sedan on the dirt road and walked to where Ethan was standing at the edge of the construction and handed him a folder. "The buyers," she said, "the people on the receiving end of what Marsh and Harmon were running. International network. We've been working it from our end for months." She let him open the folder and look at what was inside photographs of women he had not known before and now knew as the names from the missing persons files. Older, marked by what had happened, but present alive, looking at the camera with the expression of people who have survived something they were not supposed to survive. "They'll need someone who understands," Pierce said. "Someone who can show them that what comes after is livable." She looked at Lily, who was across the field talking to Jake's dog, with the unself-conscious ease of someone who had learned to accept comfort from animals without explanation. "I was hoping to ask her." "I'll ask," Ethan said. "But I think you already know the answer." Lily said yes before Pierce finished the sentence. The evening came on slowly, the way evenings come on, in Tennessee in early fall, the light going golden and then amber, and then something that is not quite any color, but is every color at once, and the sounds of the construction site quieted as the workers left for the day. Ethan walked to the rail car. They had moved it. A decision that had been practical. It was evidence it had been photographed and cataloged and released, and also something more than practical. It sat now at the edge of the property on a concrete pad that Ethan had poured himself under the canopy of the old hardwood trees. Not a monument, not a marker. Something that ought to stay visible, he had decided, because some things ought not to be hidden again. He climbed to the top and sat with his feet over the edge and his back against the faded red-brown steel that had gone warm with the day's sun. Rex jumped up beside him with the economy of movement that was returning as the rib healed and the hips stopped troubling him, and they sat together in the last of the light. Rex's vest was off. He was not working now. He pressed his shoulder against Ethan's arm with the uncalculated ease of a dog that is exactly where it intends to be. Ethan looked out over the field, over the outline of the building going up over the creek line in the distance, and the tree line beyond it, and the last color leaving the sky. "You started this," he said to Rex. "That morning, in the parking lot. You knew something was wrong before I could see anything." He looked at the dog. "You stopped and I followed, and here we are." Rex looked out over the field with the settled attention of a dog that is not troubled by credit or its absence. Good work, Ethan said. Rex's tail moved once. Conclusive, unhurried, the single beat of a metronome that has been keeping accurate time since the beginning. 6 months after the center opened, a car pulled up to the property gate on a Tuesday afternoon. Not an official vehicle, not someone they were expecting. A young woman got out, early 20s, using crutches similar to Lily's, her face carrying the careful stillness of someone who has learned to manage fear in public. She looked at the building, at the sign on the gate, and then at Lily, who had come out to see who it was. "Is this where Lily Grant works?" the woman said. "I'm Lily. My name is Cassidy Merritt. I'm from Knoxville." She stopped. Started again. "There's an officer there he keeps telling me my benefits will be reviewed, that there are questions about my eligibility. He wants me to come in for a meeting, alone." Her voice held steady, but just barely. "Someone in a support group told me about you, about what you did, about this place." She looked at Rex, who had come to stand beside Lily, with his ears forward and his attention complete. "They said you have a tongue who can tell the difference between someone doing their job and someone doing something else." Rex looked at Cassidy Merritt for a long moment with the full weight of his attention. Then he stepped to one side, leaving the space in front of the gate clear. Lily looked back at Ethan, who was standing 20 feet away. He nodded once. "Come inside," Lily said, opening the gate wider. "You're safe here." Ethan watched Lily guide Cassidy Merritt toward the building, Rex walking alongside them, the trained protection dog from Jake's team falling into step on the other side. He watched the gate close behind them, and the building receive them, and the ordinary afternoon continue in all the ways it does when something important has just happened, quietly without announcement, the way important things often do. He thought about the parking lot of Miller's General Store, the hesitation before the automatic door, the way Rex had stopped, and the way Ethan had followed without knowing yet what he was following toward. He thought about a letter under a floorboard pressed into paper by someone who had needed the words to be permanent, who had prayed for a dog who would stop in the right place. He thought about what it cost to stay. Not the dramatic cost, the truck, the threats, the fire. The other cost. The daily cost of remaining in a place that is difficult when leaving is available. The cost of choosing again and again when the choosing would have been easier if you had stopped after the first time. Rex pressed against his leg. Ethan scratched behind the dog's ear in the place where Rex's professional detachment temporarily gave way to something warmer. Lily's laugh came across the field from inside the building, and it was the laugh of someone who has earned it, and the creek moved through its corner of the property with the complete indifference of water to human consequence, and the stars came on above the hardwood trees the way they always do. Ethan Cole stood on the property he had bought with what he had left and looked at what it had become. "Not bad," he said quietly to no one, and to Rex and to the evening, for a man who just wanted coffee. Rex's ear turned toward him. His tail moved once. Then he was still watching the tree line with the patient certainty of a dog who has decided that this place is worth watching over and intends to keep doing exactly that. Sometimes God doesn't announce himself with thunder. Sometimes he sends a dog who will not move until you pay attention. He leaves a letter in a place that only the faithful stop to find. He puts the broken in the path of the stubborn and watches to see if the stubborn will stop. Lily Grant did not need saving. She needed one person to believe she was worth stopping for. In your own life, there are moments like that. Moments when walking away costs nothing visible and costs everything that matters. When silence is safe and presence is not, and your body is already turning toward the door. In this story, a tired veteran followed a dog into a parking lot and found a letter that 17 women were waiting on. A cashier kept a folder in a locked drawer for 8 months because she couldn't stop watching and couldn't yet speak. An old woman on a porch gave an address to a stranger and asked only that he find the girls. None of them were asked. None of them were ready. All of them decided that someone else's pain was their business. May you find the courage to stay when leaving is easier. May you find something faithful beside you when you need it most. And when you are the one in the parking lot watching something go wrong in a small store on an ordinary morning, may you remember that the person on the floor is someone's everything. And may you decide, as a tired veteran decided on a Tuesday in Tennessee, that this is exactly your business. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Tell us in the comments what moment stayed with you. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and the stubborn grace of people who refuse to look away. God bless and keep you.